Imagine waking up tomorrow with the exact same problems you have today. The same stress, the same doubts, the same feeling that you're capable of more. But somehow life never quite changes. Now imagine waking up 10 years from now, and nothing inside you has changed either. That is the quiet danger most people never notice. Life rarely collapses in one dramatic moment. Instead, it slowly drifts. Days repeat themselves. Thoughts repeat themselves. Reactions repeat themselves. And before you realize it, the patterns inside your mind have quietly built the direction of your entire life. Most people believe their circumstances are the problem, but the real system running everything is the mind. The mind decides what you focus on. The mind decides what you believe about yourself. The mind decides whether you act, hesitate, grow, or stay the same. And here is the strange part. Almost nobody is ever taught how to train it. Instead, the mind fills with noise, unfinished worries, old doubts, constant distractions. Slowly, clarity disappears, and living on autopilot becomes normal. But when you learn how to clear that noise and take control of your thinking, something powerful begins to happen. You stop drifting, and you start leading your own life. Before we dive in, take a second to hit that like button and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. You might be surprised to find someone listening from the same place as you. Chapter 1. Challenge your limiting beliefs by replacing them with truth. Most people spend their entire lives inside a mental box they did not consciously build. A box made of inherited ideas, repeated messages, quiet fears, and assumptions that were never questioned. From the earliest moments of childhood, the mind begins absorbing signals about what is possible and what is not. Parents, teachers, peers, culture, and early experiences all leave impressions. Over time, these impressions settle into beliefs, and once a belief settles into the mind, it begins shaping everything. The way you interpret events, the way you respond to challenges, the opportunities you believe you deserve. What makes this process powerful and dangerous is that most of these beliefs operate silently. They do not announce themselves as opinions. They appear as facts. The mind does not ask whether they are true. It simply asks whether they are familiar. And familiarity often wins. The brain is designed to conserve energy and maintain safety. When an idea has been repeated often enough, the brain begins to treat it as a reliable pattern. This pattern becomes a shortcut. Instead of evaluating every situation from scratch, the mind uses existing beliefs as filters through which it interprets reality. That means your beliefs do not merely describe your life. They help create it. A limiting belief is simply a thought that has been accepted as a final truth about who you are or what you are capable of becoming. The belief may have started from a single moment, a criticism, a rejection, a failure. But if that moment was emotionally intense, the brain recorded it with special importance. Over time, the thought repeated itself quietly. I'm not smart enough. I'm not the type of person who succeeds. I've always been like this. I'm too late to change. These statements rarely appear dramatically. They whisper in the background of everyday thinking. They shape decisions so subtly that you may never notice their influence. But their impact is enormous. Every belief acts like an instruction to the brain. Neuroscience shows that repeated thoughts strengthen neural pathways. The more often you think something, the more efficient the brain becomes at producing that thought again. Eventually, the belief becomes automatic. It runs without effort, like a program operating beneath the surface of awareness. And when a belief becomes automatic, it begins guiding behavior. If you believe you are not disciplined, you hesitate to attempt disciplined actions. If you believe you are not capable of success, you unconsciously sabotage opportunities that could prove otherwise. The mind avoids situations that threaten its existing narrative because maintaining internal consistency feels safer than confronting uncertainty. This is how invisible limits are created. But there is a crucial truth that changes everything once you understand it. You were not born with any of these beliefs. They were learned. And what is learned can be revised. The mind is not a rigid structure. It is an adaptive system. Scientists call this ability neuroplasticity. The brain's capacity to reorganize itself through new experiences and repeated thought patterns. Every time you question an old belief, you interrupt the automatic pathway that has been running for years. Every time you replace it with a more accurate perspective, you begin forming a new one. This is where real mental freedom begins. Not with blind optimism, not with pretending problems do not exist, but with the courage to examine what you have been believing about yourself. Start by observing the language that appears in your mind during moments of difficulty. When you face a challenge, what is the first internal reaction? Do you hear the voice that says, "I can't handle this"? Do you notice phrases like, "I always fail," or "This never works for me"? These phrases are clues. They reveal the beliefs operating beneath the surface. Once you recognize them, the next step is honesty. Write the belief down exactly as it appears. Do not soften it or disguise it. If the belief says, "I'm not good enough," then write those exact words. Then, ask a simple but powerful question. Where did this belief come from? Was it something a teacher once said? A painful moment of rejection? A comparison that made you feel small? Many beliefs lose their authority the moment you examine their origin. You realize that what once felt like absolute truth was actually a temporary interpretation of a past event. And past interpretations do not have to control present choices. The next step is to test the belief. Ask yourself whether it is universally true. Can you find any moment in your life that contradicts it? Even a small example where you acted differently? Often you will discover that the belief was never accurate in the first place. It simply survived because it was never challenged. Once you see this clearly, you can begin replacing it with a statement that reflects growth rather than limitation. Not a fantasy, not an unrealistic affirmation, but a grounded truth that allows movement forward. If the old belief says, "I'm not disciplined," you might replace it with, "I am learning discipline through small daily actions." If the old belief says, "I'm not worthy of respect," the new truth might be, "I deserve respect, and I begin by respecting myself." These new beliefs may feel unfamiliar at first. That is normal. Remember that the brain prefers familiarity. The old beliefs feel comfortable simply because they have been rehearsed longer. But repetition changes everything. Every time you repeat a new truth, you strengthen a different neural pathway. Every time you act in alignment with that truth, you provide evidence that reinforces it. Slowly, the old belief weakens, not because you forced it away, but because you stopped feeding it. Your mind works like a garden. What you plant grows. What you neglect fades. If you continue planting seeds of doubt, the harvest will always be hesitation and fear. But if you begin planting seeds of clarity, self-respect, and responsibility, a different identity begins to form. And identity is powerful. Once a belief becomes part of how you see yourself, your behavior naturally aligns with it. You no longer act from obligation. You act from who you believe you are becoming. This is the difference between surface change and deep transformation. Surface change focuses on results. Deep transformation focuses on identity. Instead of chasing outcomes, you become the kind of person who naturally produces those outcomes. A person who challenges limiting beliefs begins to move differently through life. They stop waiting for approval because they trust their internal compass. They stop letting past experiences define future possibilities. They recognize that growth is not about becoming someone else. It is about uncovering who they truly are beneath the layers of conditioning they inherited. You are not the worst moment of your past. You are not the opinion of someone who failed to understand your value. You are not the voice in your head that tells you to play small. You are the awareness capable of choosing new beliefs. And the moment you begin choosing those beliefs consciously, the boundaries that once defined your life begin to dissolve. This is where your freedom starts, not in changing the entire world around you, but in changing the thoughts that shape how you move through it. Because what you believe today quietly becomes the life you live tomorrow. Choose carefully. Chapter 2. Eliminate mental clutter by organizing your thoughts. Daily, every day, your mind collects information. Conversations you had, things you forgot to do, problems you still need to solve, emotions you never fully processed, ideas that appeared briefly and disappeared again. Most of this material never leaves. It stays circulating quietly in the background of your awareness. One thought leads to another, and another, until your mind becomes crowded with unfinished loops. The strange part is that you rarely notice the accumulation while it is happening. But you feel its consequences. You wake up feeling tense without knowing exactly why. Your attention jumps from task to task. Simple decisions begin to feel overwhelming. This is the weight of mental clutter. Mental clutter is not something you can see, but it affects everything. It clouds your focus, distorts your judgment, and drains your emotional energy. When the mind is overloaded, even small responsibilities begin to feel heavier than they actually are. Many people assume that this feeling comes from being too busy, but the real cause is usually something deeper: the absence of inner structure. Without structure, thoughts spill over into each other endlessly. The mind attempts to hold everything at once: tasks, worries, memories, future plans. And because it cannot distinguish between what truly matters and what does not, it treats everything as equally urgent. Imagine a room where nothing is ever put away. Papers scattered across the floor, objects piled on every surface, important items buried beneath things that do not belong there. Eventually, you would struggle to find anything at all. This is what happens inside an unorganized mind. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as cognitive load. The brain has a limited capacity for active processing. When too many pieces of information compete for attention at the same time, the system slows down. Focus weakens. Emotional regulation becomes more difficult. Even creativity declines. In other words, a cluttered mind cannot think clearly. And clarity is the foundation of a calm life. Without clarity, your decisions become reactive instead of intentional. Your attention becomes scattered instead of focused. You begin responding to whatever demands your energy in the moment, instead of directing your energy toward what truly matters. The solution is not to force your mind to think less. The solution is to give your thoughts a place to go. Just as your physical environment needs occasional cleaning, your mental environment requires regular organization. This process does not require complicated tools or hours of meditation. It begins with something very simple: taking your thoughts out of your head and placing them somewhere visible. A blank piece of paper is enough. Sit down and begin writing everything that is currently occupying your mind. Do not organize it yet. Do not try to make sense of it. Just empty the contents of your thoughts onto the page. Tasks you need to complete. Problems you are worried about. Ideas that keep appearing. Emotions you have been carrying. Write until the mind feels lighter. This process works because the brain was never designed to store large amounts of unresolved information indefinitely. When thoughts remain trapped inside your head, the mind repeatedly cycles through them in an attempt to keep them from being forgotten. This repetition creates the feeling of mental pressure, but the moment a thought is written down, the brain receives a signal. The information is safe. It no longer needs constant attention. Suddenly, the mind gains space. Once your thoughts are on paper, you can begin organizing them. Look at what you wrote and ask 3 simple questions. What requires action? What is simply an emotion that needs acknowledgement? What is noise that can be released? This small act of sorting changes everything. It transforms chaos into structure. You begin distinguishing between what truly deserves attention and what has simply been occupying mental space without purpose. Many thoughts lose their intensity the moment they are examined. A worry that felt overwhelming becomes manageable once you see it clearly. A decision that seemed impossible becomes simpler when broken into smaller steps. The mind stops reacting emotionally and begins thinking logically. Another important realization emerges during this process. Not every thought deserves your attention. The mind produces ideas constantly. Some are useful. Others are simply mental noise created by habit, fatigue, or external influence. If you automatically believe every thought that appears, your inner world becomes unstable. Instead, train yourself to observe thoughts with a small amount of distance. When a thought arises, pause for a moment and ask, "Is this useful right now?" If the answer is no, you can set it aside. Imagine placing the thought on a shelf to revisit later, if necessary. This does not mean suppressing it. It simply means choosing when it deserves your attention. You are not the servant of your thoughts. You are the one who decides which ones guide your actions. Daily mental organization also helps you close what psychologists call open loops. An open loop is any unfinished task or unresolved decision that the brain continues reminding you about. Each open loop consumes a small amount of mental energy. Individually, they seem harmless, but together, they create constant tension. Closing even a few of these loops can dramatically reduce mental pressure. Make the phone call you have been avoiding. Send the message you keep postponing. Decide something you have been endlessly reconsidering. Completion creates relief. Mental organization also requires emotional honesty. Thoughts are not the only things that create clutter. Unprocessed emotions, anger, sadness, resentment, also occupy space in the mind. When emotions are ignored, they continue influencing your behavior from beneath the surface. Give yourself permission to acknowledge what you feel, not to dwell on it endlessly, but to understand it. Emotions carry information about what matters to you. When you listen to them instead of suppressing them, they lose their power to create confusion. Over time, the habit of organizing your thoughts becomes a form of mental discipline. You wake up with clearer direction. You respond to situations more calmly. You remember what matters instead of constantly feeling behind. Perhaps the most important change is that you begin trusting your own mind again. A disorganized mind feels uncertain because it cannot see clearly. But a structured mind develops confidence. It knows where its attention belongs. It knows what needs to be done. It knows what can be released. And from that clarity comes a new kind of peace, not the absence of responsibility, but the quiet certainty that your mind is no longer working against you. Instead, it has become your ally. Chapter 3. Reprogram your mind by focusing on positive self-talk. Every word you say to yourself becomes a message your mind learns to believe. Most people think that self-talk is harmless background noise. A few critical thoughts here, a little doubt there, a quiet judgment when something goes wrong. But the mind is always listening, even when you are not consciously paying attention. It records the tone you use with yourself. It absorbs the language you repeat in silence. And over time, those repeated words become instructions. If the instructions are harsh, the mind adapts to harshness. If the instructions are doubtful, the mind adapts to doubt. If the instructions are empowering, the mind begins adapting to strength. This is why the way you speak to yourself matters far more than most people realize. Many of the beliefs that limit people are reinforced every single day through internal dialogue. A mistake happens, and the mind says, "I always mess things up." A challenge appears, and the thought emerges, "I'm not good at this." A setback occurs, and the voice whispers, "Maybe I'm just not capable." These statements may seem small in the moment, but repetition gives them power. The brain does not distinguish between thoughts spoken out loud and thoughts spoken internally. Both activate the same neural networks. Each time a negative message is repeated, the brain strengthens the pathway associated with that belief. Eventually, the thought becomes automatic. You begin expecting failure before you even try. This process is not personal weakness. It is simply the way the brain learns. Neural circuits grow stronger with repetition. If a certain pattern of thinking occurs frequently enough, the brain becomes efficient at producing it again. But this same principle also works in the opposite direction. If you change the messages you consistently send to your mind, you begin reshaping the pathways that influence your behavior. In neuroscience, this process is called cognitive restructuring. In simple terms, it means that the mind can be reprogrammed through conscious thought. You are not permanently stuck with the voice you developed years ago. You can build a new one. Positive self-talk does not mean pretending life is easy or ignoring real problems. It means choosing language that supports growth rather than defeat. It means speaking to yourself with the same clarity and respect you would offer someone you genuinely care about. Think about the way you would encourage a friend who is struggling. You would not tell them they are hopeless. You would not remind them constantly of their mistakes. You would point out their strengths. You would remind them that progress takes time. Yet many people speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to another human being. They criticize every misstep. They replay past failures endlessly. They measure themselves against unrealistic standards. This constant criticism slowly weakens confidence. The mind begins associating effort with emotional punishment. Eventually, you start avoiding situations where you might fail, not because you lack ability, but because you fear the internal attack that follows. Positive self-talk breaks that cycle. It replaces harsh judgment with constructive guidance. When something goes wrong, instead of saying, "I failed again," the mind can learn to say, "That didn't work, but I can adjust and try again." When a challenge appears, instead of, "I can't do this," the new message becomes, "I can figure this out step by step." These small changes in language may appear insignificant, but they reshape how the brain interprets experience. Instead of scanning for evidence of weakness, the brain begins searching for evidence of capability. Your attention shifts from problems you cannot control toward actions you can take. This shift changes how you show up in the world. Your posture becomes more confident. Your decisions become more courageous. Your persistence becomes stronger. The most important time to practice positive self-talk is not when everything is going well. It is when things feel uncertain, when you are discouraged, when the outcome is unclear, when the old voice of doubt begins to speak again. In those moments, your mind is most impressionable. The words you repeat during difficulty determine whether the experience strengthens you or weakens you. Instead of surrendering to the voice of defeat, speak stability into yourself. Remind yourself, I can take one step forward. I have handled difficult situations before. This moment does not define my future. These are not empty affirmations. They are anchors that stabilize your nervous system. The brain interprets confident language as a signal that the situation is manageable. Stress decreases. Problem-solving ability improves. Your internal voice becomes a source of strength instead of pressure. Reprogramming the mind also requires attention to what you consume. The thoughts you repeat internally are often reflections of messages you encounter externally. Conversations, media, social environments, all of these influence the language your mind absorbs. If you constantly expose yourself to negativity, comparison, and criticism, those patterns slowly become part of your own thinking. But when you surround yourself with ideas that encourage growth, the internal voice begins to echo those ideas. What you hear repeatedly becomes what you think repeatedly. Affirmations can be a powerful tool for strengthening positive self-talk. Choose statements that represent the person you are becoming, rather than the person you fear you are. Repeat them daily, especially in moments of quiet reflection. Statements such as, I am capable of growth. I am building discipline through consistent effort. I trust myself to learn and improve. Over time, these messages begin forming new mental patterns. There will be days when the practice feels unnatural, days when doubt feels louder than confidence. That is normal. The brain resists change at first because the old patterns are familiar, but consistency changes everything. Each time you interrupt a negative thought and replace it with a constructive one, you weaken the old pathway and strengthen the new one. Slowly, the internal dialogue shifts. Instead of being your harshest critic, you become your strongest supporter. And once that shift occurs, something remarkable happens. Your confidence no longer depends entirely on outside validation. You begin generating encouragement from within. You develop a quiet belief in your ability to grow, adapt, and continue moving forward even when circumstances are uncertain. This is how self-belief is rebuilt. Not through grand declarations, but through thousands of small conversations you have with yourself when no one else is listening. Your words shape your thoughts. Your thoughts shape your actions. Your actions shape the life you live. Choose those words wisely. Chapter 4. Overcome fear by taking small, consistent actions. Each day. Fear rarely appears as a loud command telling you to stop. Most of the time it arrives quietly, disguised as hesitation, overthinking, or the feeling that you should wait just a little longer before taking action. It convinces you that the timing is not right yet, that the plan is not perfect enough, or that you need more certainty before moving forward. At first, these thoughts seem reasonable, but the longer you listen to them, the stronger fear becomes. When action is delayed, the mind begins filling the empty space with imagined outcomes. It predicts embarrassment, rejection, failure, disappointment. The brain's survival system, designed to protect you from danger, starts exaggerating the risks. Soon, the path forward looks far more intimidating than it actually is. This is how fear grows, not because the situation itself is impossible, but because the mind has spent too much time imagining everything that could go wrong. Yet there is one force that consistently weakens fear. Action. Not dramatic leaps, not reckless decisions, just small, consistent steps taken despite uncertainty. Most people misunderstand fear. They believe courage means eliminating fear before moving forward. But courage has never required the absence of fear. In reality, courage is the decision to move while fear is still present. Fear often appears in situations that matter. When you care deeply about an opportunity, a relationship, a goal, or a new direction in life, the unknown naturally creates tension. Your mind tries to predict the outcome in order to protect you, but the future cannot be fully predicted, and waiting for perfect certainty usually leads to standing still. The key is to change your relationship with fear. Instead of treating it as a command to stop, begin seeing it as a signal that growth may be nearby. The moments that make you slightly uncomfortable are often the moments that expand your abilities. If everything you do feels safe and predictable, it usually means you are operating within familiar limits. Growth begins just beyond those limits. This does not require reckless decisions or extreme risk. The most effective way to overcome fear is through gradual exposure. Repeatedly facing a challenge in manageable steps until the brain learns that the situation is not dangerous. Psychologists call this process desensitization. Each time you confront a fear and survive the experience, the brain updates its prediction. The threat becomes smaller. Confidence grows. But the first step must happen before that confidence appears. Start small. If you are afraid to speak up in conversations, begin by sharing one thought instead of remaining silent. If rejection worries you, introduce yourself to someone new, even if the interaction is brief. If failure keeps you from starting a project, work on it for 5 minutes instead of trying to complete everything at once. 5 minutes may not seem significant, but action changes the internal story. When you act, even in a small way, your brain receives new evidence. I am capable of moving forward despite discomfort. That evidence becomes the foundation of confidence. Confidence is not built through thinking. It is built through experience. Each small action rewires your nervous system. The brain learns that uncertainty does not equal danger. It learns that discomfort is temporary and manageable. Over time, the fear that once felt overwhelming begins to shrink. This transformation rarely happens overnight. It happens through repetition. Consistency matters far more than intensity. Anyone can take a bold step once, but real courage develops when you return, again and again, to the actions that once frightened you. Every time you choose progress over avoidance, you cast a vote for the person you are becoming. Someone who acts despite fear. Someone who trusts their ability to adapt. Someone who refuses to remain stuck. The brain remembers patterns. If you repeatedly avoid situations that trigger fear, the mind strengthens the connection between fear and retreat. But if you repeatedly move forward, despite discomfort, the brain begins forming a new association. Fear no longer means stop. Fear begins to mean proceed carefully, but proceed. This shift is powerful because it changes how you interpret the feeling itself. Instead of seeing fear as evidence of weakness, you begin seeing it as part of the process of growth. Even the most confident individuals experience fear. The difference is that they do not treat fear as an authority. They treat it as information. Sometimes fear warns you about real risks that require preparation. But often, it is simply the mind reacting to unfamiliar territory. The only way to discover which is true is through action. Action reveals what imagination exaggerates. You may discover that the situation you feared is manageable. You may learn new skills that reduce the uncertainty, or you may fail once and realize that failure is not the disaster your mind predicted. In every case, movement produces clarity. Another important truth about fear is that it thrives in isolation. When a challenge exists only in your thoughts, it grows larger with every mental rehearsal. But once you engage with reality, speaking the words, starting the task, entering the situation, the unknown becomes something you can work with. Reality is almost always less terrifying than imagination. There will be days when fear returns strongly. That is part of the process. The mind does not erase old patterns instantly, but each time fear appears, you have a choice. You can wait until it disappears, which may take forever, or you can move forward while it is still there. One step, then another tomorrow. Over time, these small acts of courage create momentum. What once required enormous effort begins to feel natural. Situations that once intimidated you become part of your normal experience. The mountain that once looked impossible becomes a path you have already climbed. This is how strength develops. Not through one heroic moment, but through many quiet decisions to keep going, even when uncertainty remains. You do not need to eliminate fear in order to live a powerful life. You only need to stop letting it decide the direction. Because every time you act despite fear, you remind yourself of something important. Your potential is far greater than the voice that tries to limit it. Chapter 5. Transform stress into growth by embracing uncomfortable situations. Stress is often treated as something to avoid. People search constantly for ways to escape pressure, reduce discomfort, and stay inside the narrow space where life feels predictable. They look for shortcuts, distractions, or environments where nothing demands too much from them. At first, this seems like a reasonable strategy. Comfort feels safe. Familiar routines feel manageable. The absence of stress appears to promise peace. But there is a hidden cost. A life built entirely around comfort slowly begins to shrink. Growth does not occur where everything feels easy. It happens at the edges of your ability. In the moments when something challenges your patience, stretches your skill, or asks more from you than you expected to give. Stress, when understood correctly, is not the enemy. It is a signal. It appears when something meaningful is happening, when you are entering unfamiliar territory, when your abilities are being tested, when your current capacity is expanding toward a new level. The problem is not stress itself. The problem is how most people interpret it. If you see stress as a threat, your body reacts defensively. The nervous system tightens. Your thinking becomes narrow and reactive. You search for ways to escape the discomfort as quickly as possible. But if you interpret stress as a challenge rather than a danger, the entire internal response changes. Your focus sharpens. Your energy mobilizes. Your mind begins looking for solutions. Biologically, the body is designed to handle controlled stress. Scientists call this process hormesis, the phenomenon where moderate stress strengthens a system rather than damaging it. Muscles grow stronger when exposed to resistance. The immune system becomes more resilient when challenged by small threats. The same principle applies to the mind. When you willingly engage with manageable difficulties, your psychological capacity expands. What once felt overwhelming becomes familiar. What once caused anxiety becomes a situation you know how to navigate. This is how resilience develops. Imagine a muscle that is never used. Over time, it weakens. Even simple movements become difficult. But when that muscle is challenged gradually and consistently, it adapts. It grows stronger with each repetition. Your emotional strength works the same way. Every uncomfortable situation offers a chance to build that strength. The difficult conversation you would rather avoid. The project that demands effort beyond your comfort zone. The uncertainty that forces you to trust your ability to adapt. These moments feel uncomfortable because they require energy and attention. But they are also the moments where character develops. Many people misunderstand this process and assume that stress means something is wrong. They interpret discomfort as evidence that they should stop. In reality, discomfort often means you are expanding beyond your previous limits. The mind is stretching, and stretching always creates tension. The key is learning to sit with that tension without immediately labeling it as a problem. You do not need to love stress in order to benefit from it. You only need to stop resisting it completely. Resistance amplifies suffering because the mind keeps fighting the reality of the situation. Acceptance, on the other hand, allows you to work with the experience instead of against it. Acceptance does not mean passivity. It means acknowledging that growth requires effort and choosing to engage with the challenge anyway. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is changing the question you ask when facing difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" ask, "What is this situation teaching me?" This single shift transforms your relationship with stress. If pressure appears at work, it may be showing you where new skills need to be developed. If tension appears in a relationship, it may reveal the need for clearer communication or stronger boundaries. If uncertainty enters your life, it may be inviting you to develop patience and adaptability. Every difficult situation carries information, but you can only access that information if you remain present long enough to listen. Another important aspect of transforming stress into growth is learning to break challenges into smaller pieces. When a situation feels overwhelming, the mind tends to focus on the entire problem at once. This creates a sense of helplessness because the brain cannot process large amounts of complexity simultaneously. Instead, focus on what is within your control in the present moment. Take one step, then evaluate the next. Each small action restores a sense of agency. Instead of feeling trapped by the size of the challenge, you begin engaging with manageable tasks that move you forward. Progress reduces stress, because progress reminds the mind that change is possible. Emotional honesty is also important during stressful periods. Many people try to appear strong by suppressing their feelings. They ignore fatigue, frustration, or sadness because they believe acknowledging those emotions will make them weaker. But emotional suppression creates internal pressure. True strength comes from recognizing what you feel without allowing those emotions to dictate your actions. You can admit that something is difficult while still choosing to continue. You can experience stress without allowing it to define your identity. Stressful periods are not punishments. They are preparation. They sharpen your thinking under pressure. They strengthen your ability to regulate emotion when circumstances become unpredictable. They teach you about your own limits and invite you to expand them. The individuals who grow the most in life are rarely those who avoided difficulty. They are the ones who repeatedly leaned into it. They treated hard moments as teachers rather than obstacles. Each challenge revealed something new about their character. Sometimes it exposed a weakness that needed improvement. Other times, it revealed a strength they did not realize they possessed. Either way, the experience became valuable. When you begin viewing stress through this lens, something interesting happens. Instead of fearing discomfort, you start recognizing it as part of progress. The tension that once made you retreat begins to signal that you are moving in the direction of growth. You become less fragile. You stop expecting life to be easy. And because you stop expecting ease, you become more capable of handling difficulty when it appears. This creates a powerful kind of confidence. Not the confidence that comes from believing nothing will go wrong, but the confidence that comes from knowing you can handle challenges when they do. That confidence changes how you approach the future. You stop shrinking from pressure. You begin meeting it with curiosity and discipline. And over time, the very situations that once felt overwhelming become the experiences that shape your strongest qualities. Patience, resilience, clarity under pressure, stress, when embraced rather than avoided, becomes the forge where those qualities are formed. The heat may feel uncomfortable while you are inside it, but when you emerge from it, you are stronger than before. Chapter 6. Develop resilience by bouncing back from failure with purpose. Failure has a way of testing the story you believe about yourself. When something doesn't work out the way you hoped, when the plan collapses, when the opportunity disappears, when the effort you invested seems to produce nothing, it creates a moment of confrontation. Not just with the situation itself, but with your identity. In that moment, the mind begins asking questions. Was I not capable enough? Did I make a mistake that proves I shouldn't try again? Is this evidence that I'm not meant for what I was pursuing? These thoughts appear quickly, and if you are not careful, they begin shaping the meaning you attach to the experience. But failure, by itself, has no fixed meaning. It is simply feedback. The meaning is created by the interpretation you choose. Some people treat failure as a final verdict. They interpret the outcome as proof that they are not good enough, that their efforts were pointless, or that trying again would only lead to more disappointment. When failure becomes a personal judgment, motivation collapses. Others see failure differently. They see it as information. They recognize that every attempt, whether successful or not, reveals something about the path forward. It exposes weaknesses that need strengthening, assumptions that need correcting, or strategies that need adjusting. The difference between these two perspectives determines everything. Resilience is not the ability to avoid failure. No one escapes setbacks completely. Resilience is the ability to absorb the experience, learn from it, and continue moving with greater clarity than before. It is the decision to rise instead of retreat. This mindset begins with honesty. When failure occurs, the first instinct is often to defend yourself emotionally. You may try to minimize the outcome, blame circumstances, or distract yourself from the disappointment. But real resilience starts with facing reality directly. Acknowledge what happened. Allow yourself to feel the frustration, the disappointment, even the temporary loss of confidence. These reactions are human. Ignoring them does not make you stronger. Processing them does. Emotions that are recognized can move through you. Emotions that are suppressed tend to stay longer than necessary. Once you have faced the experience honestly, a new question becomes important. What can this teach me? This question shifts the focus from judgment to growth. Instead of asking whether you succeeded or failed, you begin asking what the experience revealed. Perhaps it showed that a certain skill needs development. Perhaps it exposed a weakness in preparation. Perhaps it revealed a better direction you had not previously considered. Every setback carries information that success often hides. When things go smoothly, it is easy to overlook flaws in the system. But when something breaks, you gain a clearer understanding of what truly needs attention. This is why many of the most capable individuals have long histories of failure behind them. Each attempt provided data. Each setback refined their approach. They were not avoiding failure. They were learning from it. Another crucial element of resilience is ownership. When something goes wrong, the mind naturally searches for external explanations. Circumstances, other people, timing, bad luck. These factors can certainly influence outcomes. But focusing entirely on what you cannot control leaves you powerless. Ownership restores your agency. Instead of asking who is responsible for the outcome, ask what part of the experience belongs to you. Even if the situation was not entirely your fault, there is always something to learn about your choices, your preparation, or your response. Ownership is not about blame. It is about growth. When you take responsibility for the aspects you can influence, you regain the ability to improve. You stop waiting for circumstances to change and begin adjusting your actions instead. This shift is empowering. It turns failure from a stopping point into a starting point. Your internal dialogue also plays a critical role during moments of setback. If your inner voice becomes harsh and critical, the experience becomes heavier than necessary. Self-judgment amplifies the emotional impact of failure and makes it harder to try again. But when your self-talk remains grounded and constructive, the experience becomes manageable. Instead of saying, "I'm not capable," remind yourself, "This attempt didn't work, but I can adjust my approach." Instead of concluding that you should give up, recognize that learning is part of the process. The way you speak to yourself determines whether failure becomes a wall or a lesson. After reflection comes action. Resilience is not built through endless analysis. It grows when you take the next step forward, even if that step is small. Momentum matters. Action interrupts the stagnation that failure can create. Send the message you were hesitant to write. Return to the project you left unfinished. Make a new plan using what you have learned. You do not need to correct everything immediately. You only need to demonstrate to yourself that you are still moving. Movement rebuilds confidence. It reminds the mind that the story is not over. Another powerful truth about resilience is that you are never starting from zero after failure. The version of you who experienced the setback is not the same version who is moving forward now. You carry new knowledge. You carry deeper awareness. You carry the emotional strength that comes from surviving disappointment. These elements give you an advantage. The next time you face a similar challenge, your perspective will be different. You will recognize potential problems sooner. You will approach decisions with greater caution or greater courage, depending on what the lesson required. Failure refines your judgment. It strengthens your intuition. There will still be moments of doubt. That is normal. Resilience does not eliminate uncertainty. It simply teaches you that uncertainty does not have to stop you. When doubt appears, return to your purpose. Remind yourself why the effort matters. What are you building? Who are you becoming through the process? Purpose gives failure context. Without purpose, setbacks feel meaningless. With purpose, even painful experiences become part of a larger journey. You also do not have to face failure alone. Surrounding yourself with supportive individuals can strengthen your resilience. The right people will not dismiss your struggles, but they will remind you of your potential when you temporarily forget it. They encourage you to rise. They challenge you to grow. Connection reinforces resilience because it reminds you that setbacks are universal. Everyone who pursues meaningful goals encounters obstacles. Failure is not evidence that you are incapable. It is evidence that you are trying. And trying is the only path through which growth becomes possible. Each time you stand up after falling, You strengthen something inside yourself that cannot be easily shaken. Your mind becomes steadier. Your perspective becomes broader. Your confidence becomes rooted, not in perfect outcomes, but in your ability to continue. That is real resilience. Not the absence of difficulty, but the decision to keep moving with purpose even when things do not go as planned. Because every time you rise again, you prove something important to yourself. Failure may interrupt your progress, but it does not define your future. Chapter 7. Embody self-compassion by forgiving yourself every single day. There is a quiet habit many people carry without realizing it. They forgive others easily, but they rarely forgive themselves. When someone else makes a mistake, you may understand that they were overwhelmed, inexperienced, or simply human. You recognize that everyone struggles and that growth often comes through error. But when the mistake is your own, the reaction is often very different. The mind becomes harsh. The inner voice grows critical. You replay the moment again and again, analyzing every detail and imagining what you should have done differently. Over time, this pattern creates an invisible weight. Instead of learning from your mistakes and moving forward, you begin carrying guilt, shame, and regret like a permanent burden. Each memory becomes another reminder of what you believe you failed to do correctly. This is where self-compassion becomes essential. Self-compassion is not weakness. It is not making excuses for poor decisions. It is the ability to recognize your humanity and treat yourself with the same patience and understanding you would offer someone you truly care about. Without this ability, personal growth becomes extremely difficult. When the mind constantly attacks itself for past mistakes, it creates emotional resistance. The brain begins associating effort with the risk of humiliation or self-punishment. Eventually, you may avoid trying altogether, simply to escape the internal criticism that follows failure. Self-compassion breaks that cycle. It allows you to acknowledge mistakes without allowing them to define your identity. Forgiving yourself begins with a simple recognition. Being human means being imperfect. Every person who has ever learned anything meaningful has made mistakes along the way. Missteps are not evidence of inadequacy. They are evidence of participation in life. Growth rarely happens without friction. The problem is not the mistake itself. The problem is the story you attach to it afterward. If you tell yourself that the mistake proves you are incapable or unworthy, the experience becomes damaging. But if you recognize the mistake as a moment of learning, it becomes valuable. This shift does not happen automatically. It requires a conscious decision to change how you relate to your past. Start by noticing your inner critic. Everyone has one. It is the voice that appears when something goes wrong and begins delivering harsh judgments. It may sound like a parent, a teacher, or a memory from years ago. Sometimes the voice says, "You should have known better. You always ruin things. You'll never get it right." Although this voice may seem protective, it often reinforces the very patterns that keep you stuck. Instead of guiding you toward improvement, it traps you in cycles of shame and self-doubt. To practice self-compassion, you must learn to question that voice. When it appears, pause and ask yourself, is this thought helping me grow, or is it simply repeating old patterns of criticism? Often you will realize that the voice is not reflecting the present moment. It is echoing past experiences that shaped your expectations about yourself. Once you recognize this, you can respond differently. Instead of reacting with judgment, respond with curiosity and understanding. When you make a mistake, take a breath and allow yourself to feel whatever emotions arise. Frustration, disappointment, Embarrassment. These feelings are natural, but they do not have to define who you are. Allow the emotion to pass through you without attaching a permanent label to it. Remind yourself that a single moment does not determine your value as a person. You are more than the sum of your mistakes. Self-forgiveness also requires letting go of perfectionism. Many people carry the belief that if they can just perform perfectly, they will finally feel worthy of acceptance and respect. But perfection is an illusion. It is a standard that moves further away every time you try to reach it. The pursuit of perfection often leads not to excellence, but to exhaustion and constant dissatisfaction. Self-compassion allows you to replace perfection with growth. Instead of demanding flawless performance, you focus on learning and improvement. Each mistake becomes an opportunity to understand something new about yourself and your abilities. This mindset creates freedom. You begin showing up authentically rather than trying to protect an image of perfection. You take risks more willingly because mistakes no longer feel like permanent damage to your identity. Another important aspect of self-compassion is respecting your limits. Many people push themselves relentlessly, believing that constant productivity will eventually earn them the validation they seek. But this approach often leads to burnout. Self-compassion means recognizing when rest is necessary. It means understanding that your value does not depend on how much you produce or how tirelessly you perform. Sometimes, the most responsible action you can take is to pause, recover, and restore your energy. Mindfulness can help strengthen this practice. When you are present in the moment, you become more aware of how you treat yourself internally. You notice when judgment begins replacing understanding. This awareness creates space for a different response. Instead of criticizing yourself automatically, you can choose patience. Instead of replaying past mistakes endlessly, you can acknowledge them and release them. Forgiveness is not a single event. It is a daily practice. Each day you may encounter moments where you feel you could have done better. Instead of allowing those moments to accumulate into self-resentment, use them as reminders to practice compassion. You might say quietly to yourself, "I am human. I am learning. I am allowed to grow." These words are not meant to excuse irresponsibility. They are meant to create an environment where improvement becomes possible. A mind that is constantly punished cannot learn effectively. A mind that feels supported and understood becomes more willing to grow. Over time, practicing self-compassion transforms your relationship with yourself. You become less afraid of failure because you know that mistakes will be met with understanding rather than condemnation. Your emotional resilience increases. Your confidence becomes steadier because it is no longer dependent on perfect performance. You begin treating yourself as someone worthy of patience and respect. And this internal shift changes how you move through the world. When you forgive yourself regularly, the weight of past mistakes becomes lighter. You carry lessons instead of regret. You carry wisdom instead of shame. Each day becomes a chance to begin again with clarity. Self-compassion does not erase the past, but it allows the past to become a teacher rather than a prison. And when you give yourself permission to grow without constant self-judgment, something remarkable happens. You become stronger, not because you never fail, but because you refuse to abandon yourself when you do. Chapter 8. Strengthen mental clarity by practicing mindfulness in everything. Clarity in the mind rarely arrives by accident. Most people move through their days in a constant stream of activity. Tasks appear one after another. Notifications interrupt attention. Thoughts jump from past memories to future worries. The body continues functioning, but the mind becomes scattered. This scattered state slowly becomes normal. You begin reacting instead of choosing. You rush through moments instead of experiencing them. Your attention divides into dozens of directions at once. The result is a quiet exhaustion that is difficult to explain. You may have enough intelligence, enough ability, even enough time to accomplish meaningful things, yet your thinking feels clouded. Decisions become harder. Emotions become heavier. Focus weakens. The missing element is presence. Presence is the foundation of mindfulness. Mindfulness means bringing your attention fully into the moment you are living right now. Not drifting into yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's uncertainties, but noticing what is happening inside and around you in this exact moment. At first, this may sound simple, but most people discover that remaining present is surprisingly difficult. The mind is constantly stimulated. Messages arrive on your phone. Conversations pull your attention. Social comparisons appear through screens. Even when nothing external demands your focus, internal thoughts continue producing endless commentary. Without training, the mind moves automatically. This automatic mode causes many of the problems people experience in daily life. When the mind operates on autopilot, reactions replace thoughtful responses. Emotional impulses take control before awareness has time to intervene. Mindfulness interrupts this pattern. When you practice awareness, you begin noticing your thoughts instead of being carried away by them. You recognize when anxiety is forming before it completely takes over. You observe emotional reactions as they arise rather than responding immediately. This small gap between stimulus and reaction is powerful. It gives you the ability to choose. Scientists studying mindfulness have discovered that regular practice strengthens areas of the brain associated with attention, emotional regulation, and decision-making. In other words, mindfulness is not just a philosophical idea. It is a form of mental training. But mindfulness does not require long hours of meditation or special environments. It begins with ordinary activities, performed with full attention. When you eat, notice the taste and texture of your food instead of rushing through the meal while thinking about something else. When you walk, feel your feet touching the ground. When someone speaks to you, listen fully instead of preparing your response before they finish. These simple actions train your mind to remain present. Each time you bring your attention back to the current moment, you strengthen your ability to focus. Gradually, the scattered feeling in your mind begins to settle. You become more aware of your surroundings. You begin noticing patterns in your thoughts and behavior that previously passed unnoticed. For example, you may observe how certain situations trigger predictable emotional reactions. A comment from someone might produce irritation. A particular memory might create sadness. A comparison might trigger self-doubt. Without mindfulness, these reactions feel automatic and unavoidable. But with awareness, you begin recognizing the moment when the reaction begins forming. This recognition allows you to respond differently. Instead of being swept away by the emotion, you can pause. You can take a breath. You can decide how you want to handle the situation rather than letting old habits control the outcome. This is where mental clarity emerges. Clarity does not mean eliminating all emotions or thoughts. It means seeing them clearly without becoming overwhelmed by them. You begin understanding that a thought is just a thought, not an absolute truth. You recognize that emotions rise and fall like waves, rather than lasting forever. This understanding brings stability. Mindfulness also reveals how much of life is spent multitasking. Many people believe that handling several tasks at once increases productivity. In reality, the brain performs best when focused on a single activity. When attention is divided, performance decreases. By practicing mindfulness, you train yourself to do one thing at a time, with full presence. This improves not only the quality of your work, but also your sense of calm. A focused mind consumes less energy than a scattered one. Distractions still exist, of course. The world will continue offering countless opportunities for your attention to wander. But mindfulness teaches you to recognize these distractions without immediately following them. You notice the impulse to check your phone. You observe the thought that pulls your focus away. You acknowledge the urge without instantly acting on it. That brief moment of awareness creates freedom. Instead of being controlled by every impulse, you regain authority over where your attention goes. Attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. Wherever your attention moves, your energy follows. If your attention is constantly scattered across trivial concerns, your energy becomes fragmented. But when attention is directed deliberately, energy becomes concentrated. Clarity grows. Mindfulness also encourages simplicity. As awareness increases, you begin noticing how many commitments and habits do not truly serve your well-being. You may find yourself letting go of unnecessary distractions and focusing more on what genuinely matters. This simplification is not about withdrawing from life. It is about engaging with life more intentionally. You begin choosing conversations that are meaningful rather than superficial. You prioritize activities that align with your values rather than those that simply fill time. Over time, mindfulness becomes less of a practice and more of a way of living. You respond to situations with greater patience. You notice the subtle signals from your body and emotions. You become more thoughtful in your actions and words. Life itself begins to feel more vivid. Small moments become richer when you experience them fully. A conversation, a walk outside, even a quiet moment of breathing can provide clarity and calm when your attention is fully present. There will still be days when your mind wanders. That is natural. Mindfulness is not about perfection. It is about returning to the present again and again whenever you notice your attention drifting. Each return strengthens your awareness, and over time, that awareness transforms your relationship with your thoughts. Instead of being lost in mental noise, you become the observer of your own mind. From that position, clarity grows naturally. You begin trusting your perception again. Decisions become steadier. Emotional reactions become less overwhelming. And in the quiet space created by mindfulness, something important becomes possible. You begin living your life consciously, rather than simply passing through it. Chapter 9. Shift your perspective by finding gratitude in challenges. At some point in every life, difficulty arrives. It may appear as a sudden loss, an unexpected setback, a broken relationship, or a season of uncertainty that seems to stretch far longer than you anticipated. In those moments, the natural reaction of the mind is resistance. You ask questions like, why is this happening to me? What did I do wrong? When will this finally end? These questions come from a place of pain, and that pain is real. Difficult experiences test your patience, your confidence, and sometimes even your sense of identity. But hidden inside many of these experiences is a powerful opportunity. The opportunity to change how you see them. Perspective is one of the most powerful tools the human mind possesses. Two people can encounter the same situation and interpret it completely differently. One may see it as proof that life is unfair. The other may see it as a turning point that forces growth. The event itself is identical. The meaning created around it is not. This does not mean you should pretend that pain does not exist. Gratitude is not about ignoring hardship or forcing yourself to feel positive when you are hurting. True gratitude acknowledges difficulty while still searching for value inside the experience. It asks a different question. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" it asks, "What might this be teaching me?" That shift may seem small, but it changes the entire emotional direction of the mind. When you begin searching for meaning inside difficulty, the mind stops seeing itself as a victim of circumstances. Instead, it begins recognizing the possibility of growth. Gratitude during easy moments is simple. When life flows smoothly, appreciation comes naturally. But the deeper form of gratitude appears when things are difficult, and you still choose to look for something valuable inside the situation. Perhaps the challenge reveals strength you did not know you had. Perhaps it teaches patience you would never have developed otherwise. Perhaps it forces you to reevaluate your priorities and realign your life. Some of the most important lessons people carry throughout their lives come from experiences they initially wished had never happened. When you look back on your past, you may notice moments that once felt like setbacks, but eventually led to unexpected growth. The job you lost that pushed you toward a better opportunity. The relationship that ended, but helped you understand your own needs more clearly. At the time, these events felt painful. But with distance, their meaning changed. This transformation occurs because challenges reveal parts of you that comfort never touches. When life is easy, many abilities remain hidden. But when circumstances demand strength, resilience, creativity, or courage, those qualities emerge. Gratitude allows you to recognize this process while it is happening. Instead of waiting years to understand the value of a difficult experience, you begin searching for that value in the present moment. This does not remove the discomfort entirely, but it prevents the experience from becoming meaningless suffering. Meaning creates resilience. When you believe that a challenge has something to teach you, you approach it differently. You become curious instead of defeated. You begin asking questions that lead to growth. What skill is this situation asking me to develop? What belief about myself is being tested? What new perspective might this experience reveal? These questions transform hardship into exploration. Gratitude also changes your emotional energy. The mind tends to amplify whatever it focuses on. If you constantly dwell on what is unfair or painful, those emotions expand. But when you deliberately search for something to appreciate, even in difficult circumstances, your internal state begins to shift. You may notice a small moment of kindness from someone who supports you. You may recognize the strength it took simply to keep moving forward. You may realize that surviving the challenge itself is evidence of your resilience. These small recognitions gradually reshape your mindset. Gratitude grows through attention. The more you practice noticing what is still good within difficult moments, the easier it becomes to maintain emotional balance. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by hardship, you develop the ability to hold both realities at once. The challenge exists, but so does the possibility of growth. Over time, this perspective creates a profound change in how you approach life. You stop expecting every experience to be comfortable. Instead, you begin understanding that discomfort often carries valuable insight. You learn patience during uncertain periods. You develop empathy by understanding pain. You gain wisdom by reflecting on difficult experiences. These qualities cannot be taught through comfort alone. They are shaped through adversity. Another powerful aspect of gratitude is that it helps release resentment. When you remain focused only on what went wrong, bitterness can quietly accumulate. But when you acknowledge the lessons that emerged from those experiences, resentment begins to lose its hold. You do not erase the past, but you transform its meaning. Instead of carrying the experience as a burden, you carry it as wisdom. This shift allows you to move forward without the weight of constant frustration. You stop viewing life as a series of obstacles and begin recognizing it as a series of opportunities to evolve. Gradually, challenges lose some of their power to intimidate you, not because they disappear, but because you trust your ability to grow through them. You understand that even difficult chapters can contribute to the story you are building. Gratitude also reminds you of something important. No matter how challenging a situation may feel, there is always something that remains. Your ability to learn, your capacity to adapt, your willingness to continue. These qualities are evidence of strength. And when you choose to recognize them, even in moments of difficulty, you reclaim control over your perspective. Perspective shapes experience. If you constantly search for evidence that life is unfair, you will find it. But if you search for meaning, lessons, and opportunities to grow, those will begin appearing as well. This does not make hardship disappear, but it transforms how you carry it. Instead of breaking you, the experience begins strengthening you. Instead of closing your heart, it deepens your understanding of life. And eventually, you realize something powerful. The moments that once felt like obstacles were often the very moments that helped shape your resilience, your wisdom, and your ability to move forward with greater clarity. Gratitude does not change the past, but it changes the way you walk into the future. Chapter 10. Nurture your mind by choosing positive influences in your life. Your mind does not exist in isolation. Every day, it absorbs signals from the environment around you: conversations, media, relationships, opinions, expectations. These influences quietly shape how you think, what you believe about yourself, and how you interpret the world. Most of the time, this process happens without conscious awareness. You hear certain ideas repeatedly. You spend time with particular people. You scroll through endless streams of information online. Gradually, those patterns begin forming the background of your thinking. And eventually, what surrounds you begins shaping who you become. This is why your environment matters far more than most people realize. The individuals you spend time with, the content you consume, and the atmosphere you place yourself in each day all influence your mental state. Some influences encourage growth and clarity. Others quietly drain your motivation and reinforce limiting beliefs. The challenge is that negative influences often appear normal. Complaining becomes a common form of conversation. Cynicism disguises itself as realism. Constant comparison through social media begins to feel unavoidable. Slowly, these patterns begin shaping your internal dialogue. You may start doubting your own abilities. You may feel discouraged without knowing why. You may notice your motivation fading. This does not necessarily mean you lack discipline. It may simply mean your environment is working against you. Human beings are deeply social creatures. The brain naturally adapts to the emotional patterns of the people around you. Psychologists call this emotional contagion, the process through which moods, attitudes, and behaviors spread between individuals. If you spend time with people who constantly complain, criticize, or focus on negativity, your mind gradually begins adopting the same outlook. But the opposite is also true. When you surround yourself with individuals who demonstrate curiosity, resilience, and optimism, those qualities begin influencing your own thinking. This does not mean you must avoid anyone who experiences difficulty or struggles. Everyone faces challenges. But there is a difference between people who remain trapped in negativity and those who are actively trying to grow. Growth-oriented individuals encourage progress. They ask thoughtful questions. They challenge you to think differently. They remind you that improvement is possible. These influences strengthen your mindset. Your environment also includes the information you allow into your mind each day. Modern technology has created a constant flow of news, opinions, and entertainment competing for your attention. While some of this content can be informative, much of it is designed primarily to capture attention rather than support well-being. If you repeatedly expose your mind to alarming news, endless comparisons, or superficial distractions, your mental state begins reflecting those patterns. Your focus becomes fragmented. Your emotions become reactive. Your thinking becomes scattered. Choosing positive influences requires becoming intentional about what you consume. Ask yourself, does this information help me grow, or does it simply fill my mind with noise? This question applies not only to social media, but also to conversations, podcasts, books, and daily habits. The ideas you expose yourself to become the raw material from which your thoughts are built. If your mental diet consists mainly of criticism and negativity, your thinking will reflect that environment. But when you choose content that inspires curiosity, learning, and self-reflection, your mind begins expanding. Reading thoughtful books, listening to meaningful discussions, and engaging with ideas that challenge your perspective can strengthen your mental clarity. These influences stimulate reflection rather than distraction. They encourage depth rather than superficial reaction. Another powerful influence is the physical environment, where you spend your time. The spaces around you affect your mood and focus more than you might realize. A chaotic environment often creates mental distraction, while a calm and organized space supports concentration. Simple changes can make a difference. A clean workspace, natural light entering the room, moments of quiet without constant background noise. These elements signal to your brain that it is safe to focus and think clearly. Your routines also shape your mental environment. The habits you repeat daily determine the rhythm of your thoughts and emotions. If your mornings begin with stress and hurried activity, that tone may continue throughout the day. But if you start your day with calm intention, even a few minutes of quiet reflection or reading, you create a foundation of stability. These small rituals gradually influence your mindset. Perhaps the most powerful influence you can choose is the company of people who support your growth. These individuals do not necessarily agree with everything you say or do. In fact, true support often includes honest feedback and constructive challenge. But they believe in your potential. They celebrate your progress. They encourage you when doubt appears. They remind you of your strengths during difficult moments. Relationships like these create emotional safety. When you feel supported, you become more willing to take risks, pursue goals, and explore new possibilities. The presence of encouraging individuals reduces the fear of failure because you know that setbacks will be met with understanding rather than judgment. At the same time, choosing positive influences sometimes requires setting boundaries. Not every relationship or environment supports your well-being. Some situations may repeatedly pull your attention toward negativity, distraction, or self-doubt. Recognizing these patterns allows you to decide how much energy you want to invest in them. Boundaries are not about rejecting people. They are about protecting your mental clarity. You can care about others while still choosing environments that support your growth. Over time, these decisions accumulate. The people you engage with, the information you absorb, and the spaces you inhabit gradually shape your mental landscape. If those influences encourage curiosity, resilience, and purpose, your mind becomes stronger. Your thinking becomes clearer. Your emotional state becomes steadier. You begin noticing opportunities rather than obstacles. This transformation happens quietly. You may not recognize it immediately, but the quality of your environment steadily influences the quality of your thoughts. And because thoughts guide actions, those influences eventually shape the direction of your life. The key is intentional choice. You cannot control every influence that appears around you, but you can decide which ones you welcome into your mind repeatedly. Choose ideas that encourage growth. Choose relationships that support your potential. Choose environments that nurture clarity and calm. Because the influences you allow into your life today will quietly become the mindset you carry tomorrow. And your mindset, more than anything else, determines how far you are able to go. Chapter 11. Release negativity by letting go of past resentments. There are moments in life that leave a deep mark on the mind, a betrayal you didn't expect, words someone said that stayed with you long after the conversation ended, a situation where you were treated unfairly and never received the apology you deserved. These experiences do not simply disappear. Instead, they often remain stored inside the mind as resentment. You replay the memory occasionally. You imagine what you should have said. You feel a quiet frustration that the situation never resolved the way you hoped. At first, this reaction seems justified. After all, the experience hurt you. Holding on to that memory can feel like a form of protection, a way to remind yourself not to be vulnerable again. But over time, resentment becomes something heavier. It occupies space in your mind. It returns during quiet moments. It influences how you trust others and sometimes even how you see yourself. What many people do not realize is that resentment does not harm the person who caused the pain nearly as much as it harms the one holding on to it. When you carry resentment, the past continues living inside the present. Your thoughts revisit the same emotional moment again and again. Your body reacts as if the event is happening right now. Stress hormones rise. Your mood shifts. The person who hurt you may have moved on completely, but the memory continues affecting you. This is why learning to release resentment is one of the most important forms of emotional freedom. Letting go does not mean pretending the event never happened. It does not mean excusing someone else's behavior or allowing harmful actions to continue. Letting go means freeing your mind from the constant replay of the experience. It means refusing to allow one painful moment to occupy permanent space in your emotional life. The first step toward releasing resentment is understanding what forgiveness truly means. Many people misunderstand forgiveness. They believe forgiving someone means saying that what happened was acceptable. But forgiveness is not about the other person's behavior. It is about your own peace of mind. Forgiveness is the decision to stop carrying the emotional weight of the past. When you forgive, you acknowledge that the event occurred. You recognize the pain it caused, but you choose not to allow that pain to define your future. This decision is not always easy. Some wounds are deep. Some betrayals feel impossible to forget. The process of letting go may take time, reflection, and emotional honesty. But it begins with a simple realization. Holding on to resentment does not change what happened. It only prolongs the suffering. When you repeatedly replay painful memories, the brain strengthens the emotional pathway connected to that experience. The memory becomes more vivid, and the associated emotions become stronger. But when you gradually stop feeding that cycle, the intensity begins to fade. One way to begin this process is through perspective. Ask yourself whether the resentment you carry is helping you move forward in life or holding you in place? Often, the answer becomes clear. Resentment rarely improves your situation. It drains your emotional energy. It narrows your focus. It prevents you from fully experiencing the present moment. Letting go, on the other hand, restores space in your mind. It allows you to direct your attention toward growth rather than replaying the past. Another helpful step is recognizing that people often act based on their own limitations and struggles. This does not excuse harmful behavior, but it can help you see the situation with greater clarity. Many hurtful actions come from insecurity, fear, or lack of awareness. Understanding this can soften the emotional intensity surrounding the memory. You begin realizing that the event says more about the other person's condition than about your worth. You are not defined by how someone else treated you. You are defined by how you choose to respond. Sometimes releasing resentment also requires expressing what you feel. This does not necessarily mean confronting the person directly. In many cases, that may not even be possible. But writing about the experience, speaking with someone you trust, or simply acknowledging your feelings can help release emotional tension. Suppressed emotions tend to remain trapped inside the mind. Expressed emotions begin to move and eventually settle. Another powerful step is focusing on what the experience taught you. Even painful situations often reveal important lessons about boundaries, trust, or self-respect. They may help you recognize what behaviors you will no longer tolerate in the future. When you extract wisdom from the experience, the event becomes something different. Instead of remaining a wound, it becomes a source of clarity. You understand yourself better. You make stronger choices moving forward, and gradually the memory loses its emotional grip. Letting go of resentment also opens the door to deeper peace. When the mind is no longer occupied with old conflicts, your attention becomes available for more meaningful pursuits. You have more energy for relationships that support you. You have more space for creativity, curiosity, and growth. The past stops dominating your emotional landscape. This does not mean you forget what happened. Memory still exists, but the emotional charge attached to it fades. It becomes simply one chapter in a much larger story. As you continue practicing forgiveness, you may notice something surprising. You feel lighter, not because the past changed, but because your relationship with it changed. The anger, bitterness, or sadness that once defined the memory begins dissolving. In its place emerges a quiet understanding. Life is complex. People are imperfect. Mistakes happen, but you are not required to carry those mistakes forever. Each day you have the ability to release a little more of the weight you have been holding. You can choose peace over resentment. You can choose freedom over emotional attachment to the past. And when you make that choice consistently, the mind becomes calmer, the heart becomes lighter, and the future becomes easier to approach with openness rather than fear. Because the greatest gift you give yourself when you forgive is not reconciliation with the past. It is the freedom to move forward without being chained to it. Chapter 12. Focus on progress by celebrating small wins along the way. Many people underestimate the power of small progress. They imagine success as a dramatic transformation, a single breakthrough moment where everything changes at once. They picture a future where confidence suddenly appears, goals are achieved instantly, and life becomes permanently easier. But real growth rarely happens that way. Most meaningful change happens quietly, through small improvements repeated consistently over time. These improvements may seem insignificant at first, but they accumulate in powerful ways. The problem is that many people overlook them. When the mind focuses only on large achievements, It often ignores the small steps that lead to those achievements. You complete a task, but immediately move on to the next challenge without acknowledging the progress you just made. Over time, this creates a feeling of constant pressure. No matter how much you accomplish, it never feels like enough. Celebrating small wins helps break this cycle. A small win is any action that moves you slightly closer to the person you want to become. It might be completing a task you previously avoided. It might be practicing a new skill for a few minutes. It might be maintaining a habit for another day. Individually, these moments may seem minor, but collectively, they shape your identity. Every time you recognize a small win, you reinforce a powerful message to your mind. Progress is happening. This message is important because the brain responds strongly to recognition and reward. When you acknowledge progress, your brain releases dopamine, a chemical associated with motivation and satisfaction. Dopamine encourages repetition. It signals that the behavior you just performed is worth doing again. This is why celebrating small wins strengthens consistency. Each acknowledgement creates a positive feedback loop that makes it easier to continue the behavior. Without this recognition, motivation often fades. If your mind constantly tells you that your efforts are insignificant, you begin feeling discouraged. The journey toward improvement starts feeling endless because the brain never receives evidence that progress is occurring. But when you intentionally notice small achievements, your perception shifts. You begin seeing improvement everywhere. You finished reading a few pages of a book that supports your growth. You completed a short workout even though you felt tired. You chose patience in a situation where you previously reacted with frustration. These moments may appear simple, but they represent real change. Each one is evidence that you are developing new patterns. Another important aspect of celebrating small wins is that it builds confidence gradually. Confidence is often misunderstood as a personality trait that some people possess naturally. In reality, confidence is built through repeated evidence of your own capability. Each time you follow through on a commitment, even a small one, you strengthen trust in yourself. The mind begins recognizing that your actions align with your intentions. That alignment is the foundation of self-respect. When you consistently acknowledge progress, you begin viewing yourself as someone who follows through. This identity becomes powerful because behavior naturally follows identity. If you see yourself as someone who improves daily, you become more likely to continue improving. This process also protects you from perfectionism. Perfectionism often creates unrealistic expectations. When the goal is perfection, anything less feels like failure. This mindset makes progress feel frustrating because the mind constantly compares current results to an ideal that has not yet been reached. Celebrating small wins shifts the focus from perfection to improvement. Instead of asking whether something was flawless, you ask whether it moved you forward. If the answer is yes, then it deserves recognition. This perspective encourages persistence. You begin understanding that meaningful growth requires patience. Skills develop gradually. Habits strengthen through repetition. Personal transformation unfolds step by step. No single action determines your future, but the accumulation of small actions does. Another benefit of recognizing small wins is that it strengthens resilience during difficult periods. When you encounter setbacks, the mind naturally focuses on what went wrong. But if you have developed the habit of noticing progress, you can remind yourself of everything that is still moving in the right direction. Perhaps a project did not succeed the way you expected, but you gained valuable experience. Perhaps a difficult conversation occurred, but you handled it with more patience than before. These small victories provide emotional stability. They remind you that growth continues even when circumstances are imperfect. Keeping track of progress can make this practice even more powerful. Writing down small wins at the end of each day creates a visible record of improvement. Over time, this record becomes a powerful reminder of how far you have come. What once seemed impossible becomes something you do naturally. The effort you once struggled with becomes routine. These realizations reinforce confidence and motivation. Celebrating small wins also cultivates gratitude for the process of growth itself. Instead of viewing progress as a distant destination, you begin appreciating the journey. Each day becomes an opportunity to improve slightly. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to learn. This mindset transforms how you approach goals. Instead of chasing success desperately, you engage with the process of becoming better. The pressure to achieve immediate results fades because you trust the power of consistent effort. Over time, the small wins accumulate. The few minutes of practice become expertise. The small habit becomes a lifestyle. The daily improvement becomes a transformed identity. Looking back, you may struggle to identify the exact moment when the change occurred, because it happened gradually, one step at a time, one decision at a time, one small victory at a time. And when you learn to recognize those victories, you begin seeing the truth that was always present. Progress is not rare. It is happening every day, whenever you choose growth over comfort, discipline over distraction, and patience over discouragement. Celebrate those moments. They are quietly building the future you once believed was far away. Conclusion. Your life rarely changes in a single dramatic moment. It changes quietly, through the thoughts you repeat, the habits you build, and the choices you make when no one is watching. Every chapter of this journey points to the same truth. The condition of your mind shapes the direction of your life. When your beliefs become clearer, your actions become stronger. When your thoughts become calmer, your decisions become wiser. When your attention becomes focused, your progress becomes real. None of these transformations happen overnight. They grow through daily practice, questioning limiting beliefs, organizing your thoughts, speaking to yourself with respect, acting despite fear, and choosing influences that support your growth. The goal is not perfection. The goal is awareness. Each day offers a chance to move slightly closer to the person you want to become. A small act of discipline, a moment of mindfulness, a decision to let go of resentment or distraction. These choices may seem minor in isolation, but together they reshape your character. Over time, your mind becomes steadier, your perspective becomes broader, your confidence becomes quieter, but stronger. And eventually, you realize something powerful. The clarity, resilience, and direction you were searching for were never outside of you. They were waiting for you to train your mind and lead yourself forward, one intentional day at a time. If something you heard today shifted your perspective, help it reach one more person who's ready for change. And if you want to keep growing with us, subscribe. This space will be here when you need it.